So nice to meet you, Professor Ramaswamy. My name is Yeji Kim from SKinobeaition, and it's such an honor for me to have this interview with you today. While reading your column that you wrote on SKinno News, which is our SK Innovation's newsroom channel, some of the questions just come in my mind, and through today's interview, I'd like to, get some answers from you. All right, so before we start this great talk, could you briefly introduce yourself to our colleagues at SK Innovation?
I'm Kannan Ramaswamy. I teach in the area of global strategy. I have been at Thunderbird for a very long time now. Now Thunderbird is part of the Arizona State University. I teach global strategy there. I teach in the master's program at the university and also quite involved in executive education programs over the long haul.
As you mentioned in your column, starting in Europe and United States, ESG management, especially global climate change, has become one of the most important issues to deal with in Korea. Why the challenge of global climate change has captured the world's attention?
And I think if you look at it historically, most of the world, whether it's petrochemicals or any of the other companies that that were natural resource-based industries, whether you're in agriculture or forestry or fossil fuels, it was pretty much not a hot topic at all. Climate change was not a hot topic, but it was simmering on the back burner. I think over the last 5 years, people have started to realize that if we don't take any action now, we could be in very deep trouble. And more recently, I think the realization seems to have struck that if we don't do anything now, then it'll be too late. Right. So some of those companies have started trying to take some action. I think so that has historically been the case. So probably in the last 5 years, we have seen a lot more action in this regard than we have ever seen in the past. So I think it has evolved, and once I think what Malcolm Gladwell will call a tipping point. I think the need for climate change strategies or mitigation strategies has reached a tipping point. I think the realization on a very grand scale at the country level, and slowly starting to percolate down to the organizational level. That movement has also been helped by the investors. Many of the investors saying, hey, if you are not going to behave in good ways, then I don't want to invest my money with you. I'm going to take my money elsewhere. So I think those pressures, governments are placing pressure. So the organization itself is feeling tremendous societal pressure. And that's how slowly some of these changes have started to unfold.
What are the recent moves of global petrochemical companies to respond to this global climate change?
Good question. I think, to understand why SK Innovation strikes me as a different kind of a company compared to the others, let me give you some examples of what some of the other companies have done, meaning your peer companies, right, in the oil and gas environment, if you will, in the industry. If you look at, there are some really good companies, and I would probably not very many, but maybe one or two really very good companies on the other extreme, meaning these are companies that have been adopting climate mitigation strategies for quite a long time, and they are at the forefront. One such example company is this a Danish company called used to be called Dong Energy, Danish oil and natural gas company, and then changed its name to Ørsted. They cut down their entire portfolio of fossil fuel leases that they had, the exploration permits that they had, invested the money in wind farms, one of the largest wind energy producers in the world today. Have wind farms in Scandinavian region where they are headquartered, and also in the United States. In fact, very many of the large petrochemical companies and petroleum companies like ExxonMobil buy wind energy from Ørsted. So it's a really interesting kind of a collaborative arrangement, right? So you have companies like that on the one hand, but for every Ørsted, there are at least 10 or 20 companies which have never done anything. So at the other end of the extreme, my colleagues and I did a study on this to track how companies have responded to this challenge of global climate change. We found that a majority of the companies worldwide are stuck in probably the category of either doing nothing, spectators, as we call them, or what we call cautious defenders, meaning these are companies that will take some token action, but it is not part of their business strategy going forward. So they might say, okay, here we are going to make X million dollars worth of investment in this single project, and we'll see how that project materializes, and then we'll see whether we want to change our strategy or not. In other words, they are all playing a wait and see game. To me, that means that you're not convinced of the need to change, right? So you're just trying to test the waters to see, and many of those leaders, let's face it, many of those leaders probably thinking, why would I want to change it? If oil and gas prices are so high, why would I want to destroy, a cash cow? To me, I think SK probably is much closer to the other extreme than to the spectator side of things. Why do I say that? Number one, SK has made it very clear that for two reasons. One is they have realized that the world has changed and we are not going back. And no matter what we do, we are never going to be in the fossil fuels business forever in the future. There is a definite finite time period within which we will have to make that transition. The second realization is that until we make that transition, we can still use some of the cash flow from the oil and gas business to be able to fund some of the innovations in the renewables business.
You mentioned that in the column that our company's green transfer strategy has a very high potential for eventual success. So I was very intrigued in that opinion and statement as well. So could you please elaborate on this?
So it's easy to sit here and tell you, well, this is what SK wants to do. But imagine how difficult it is for a leader to be able to communicate that message to the team and say, hey, we are making very good money so long, but that business is going to disappear very soon. And we need to prepare for that day when that business is going to disappear. So it's very difficult to be able to communicate that message. So I think SK is different because, number one, the senior leadership, both at the SK Corporation level and certainly at the SK Innovation level, seem to have a sense of clarity in terms of where they are going. Most organizations struggle with that. So every company has got a different view of when this transition is going to take place, how soon, how slow. So it is very unique for every single company. And I think that is where SK has shown the clarity of purpose is very, very critical. I think that's one of the key differences that I see with SK. And then moving beyond the clarity of purpose, if you will, you also have to think about how I'm going to allocate my resources. Mm-hmm. And I think SK has shown some very impressive strengths in that area. SK Innovation, what they have going, I think, from my perspective, looking into the company, is in every single segment of the value chain, they're thinking about climate change strategies. Not many companies do that. They might be thinking about climate change in one or two areas of the value chain, but not across the entire value chain. If you look at SK's value chain and what they intend to do, they want to change the exploration part of it. They're saying, we want to drill smarter. We want to use artificial intelligence to be able to identify where we are going to have the highest prospects. That's one. As we move further, we are going to use we want to experiment with different technologies like pyrolysis and depolymerization to be able to reduce waste, to be able to make, an alternative to crude oil, if you will, more healthier crude oil, if you will, that we can then process through the refinery. So that's in the refining side. And then you clearly go all the way to the distribution side. And again, you have so many climate change initiatives going on in the distribution side. So if you look at the exploration, production, distribution process, all the entire way up to the individual end customer, there are climate change strategies at work. So that's another reason why I think SK is very impressive in what it has chosen to do.
In your column, you state that the role of leadership is the key part to make this green transformation strategy successful. Could you please explain further on this?
I think what really struck me is the fact that you had Chairman Shea first make this commitment as an entire corporation, making the commitment to say, we are really going to change as a corporation. We cannot continue to be a fossil fuels kind of company, and we need to change. And that is something that I think So I think when Chairman Che comes in and says, it is time for us to change our strategy and paints a different vision or a new vision for the modern SK Corporation, if you will. And that's essentially what he has done, painted a vision for the modern SK Corporation, the day when you no longer are dependent on fossil fuels for your revenues. And then quickly followed up by Vice Chairman Kim. I think what Vice Chairman Kim has done really well is what we in strategy would call looking forward, reasoning back. Vice Chairman Kim saying, okay, if that is the vision that we want to really go after, then what kinds of competencies and resources do I need to have today to start focusing on today so that I can deliver on that promise of that future? And that is why all this thinking about what kind of climate initiatives we're going to take across the entire value chain. One couple of examples from SK Innovation. Think about the partners that they have for the pyrolysis projects and the depolymerization projects, etc. So it took the leadership of SK Innovation to realize we might not have these technologies in-house. We have some, definitely we have a lot of technology advantages, but maybe not in these specific areas. So we will go out and partner with these firms who are experts, collaborate with them so that we can exchange ideas and both of us have a win-win kind of a proposition. Not very many companies are willing to do that, right? Because oftentimes what happens, the more successful you've been, you have a not invented here kind of syndrome, which basically says, hey, we are the kings of this business, so you don't come from there and teach us how to do things. SK is showing a lot of humility and saying we might not have all the answers, but we know who the right people are that we need to partner with to be able to get those answers. That's the reasoning back kind of thinking. And so I think leadership-wise, there is a lot of, all these actions really demonstrate that, they are taking it very seriously. And to me, I think perhaps the most telling example was when I was watching the launch of this strategy, the video of launching the strategy. I think it was the investors forum or the investors day, so story day that you're talking about. And I was very impressed with the way in which Vice Chairman Kim, he came and made a short introduction to what the strategy was. When the questions were coming from the audience, and there were these unit presidents and the unit CEOs who were answering those questions. To me, that represented a very refreshing change in the culture, in keeping with what the current generation demands, right? More accountability across the various levels of the organization, lots more autonomy to be able to speak for their own businesses. For example, SK Geocentric. For example, hey, my businesses, I know as CEO of my business, I know some of the nuances that are very critical, so I can speak to that much more effectively, and giving them the autonomy to do that. I think that was very refreshing too, because that to me signaled that the culture is also changing in keeping with the strategy.
As you told us, SK Innovation is trying to change the overall business through the green transformation strategy. So what are the other important factors that can lead the successful implementation of this strategy?
I think, sustaining the energy during the change is very difficult. And that is the challenge of most leaders, right? If you look at the SKMS system, right, you have SUPEX, that you want to be a super excellence, you want to achieve super excellence. Remember the voluntarily, willingly part of things, right? The VWBE, the voluntarily, willingly brain engagement. The voluntarily, willingly has to happen. And the voluntarily, willingly, so as a leader, you need to be able to communicate that deep sense of purpose so that people at the grassroots level are engaged in this enterprise voluntarily and willingly. We all realize that this transition is not going to happen in a year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. It's going to take a long haul. So to bring the people along for that kind of a long time period, at the same time assuring them that we are on the right path and we are delivering results and we are meeting the benchmarks. We are going from point A to point B to point C, and so on as we make that journey. That is where the leadership energy is going to be really challenged, tried and tested. Because at the end of the day, transformational change is all about culture. It's all here, right? It's all being able to change people's mindsets. And I think that's what's going to be the key. There will always be people on the outside who will be throwing stones at companies like SK saying, this is all greenwashing and so on. There will always be people like that. But we also need to understand where they come from. The only way to silence your critics is to show them results. So I think that is where the challenges are, to be able to put your head down, get the job done, keep the energy going in the right direction.
Before we wrap up this interview, do you have any message or any thoughts to share to my colleagues, my team members who will make this happen? This means the green transformation.
Yeah. I really believe that, the younger generation, people in your generation who are advancing through the ranks in this company, the message of green transformation really resonates with that kind of a generation. Because, it is this generation that's currently going through the organization, the up-and-comers in organizations such as yours. Which Asian company has said, I'm going to reduce Scope 3 emissions? I have not seen any. I have not seen any advanced country company saying, I'm going to reduce Scope 3. It's a very, very rare. Only now, some of the larger American companies are saying we need to start thinking about Scope 3. For a company like SK to say Scope 3, I want to reduce, that's amazing. And that's got to be a refreshing kind of a message for the younger generation. So I would say that it belongs to you, right? Ultimately, it is not Vice Chairman Kim who's going to be there clapping the success of this strategy. It's going to be all of you. And it's going to be all of us, by extension, the entire world.
This is such an honor to have you